The meeting room buzzed with conversations, the murmur of voices blending with the gentle clinking of water glasses. I was there in body, but my mind wandered. The fatigue from the trip still weighed heavily on me, and I just wanted to finish the meeting and retreat to the silence of my hotel room. It was at that instant that my phone screen lit up with a call from Liam. My lips curved into a faint smile. Liam. That name used to warm my chest, a promise of a safe harbor. I stepped out into the hallway, the sound from the room muffled by the heavy doors, expecting the usual. "How's the trip, love?" he would ask. "When are you coming home?" But before I could even utter a "hi," his voice came, sharp, icy. "Liam." Cold. And with an almost triumphant tone. "I'm divorcing you," he said. The words floated in the dense air of the hallway, and for a moment, my brain refused to process them. My breath caught in my throat, my lungs seemingly forgetting how to function. "I've already sold the farm," he continued, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "So you'll have to figure out where you're going to live. Enjoy that." The audacity. The complete disregard for my existence, for our history. It was so absurd that, for a millisecond, I felt tempted to laugh. But the laughter didn't come. Instead, a chilling sense of helplessness washed over me, like a wave that freezes the soul. My hand squeezed the phone so hard I felt the plastic edge digging into my palm. His words finally began to make sense, solidifying into a cruel reality. "You sold the farm?" I asked, and was surprised by my own voice. It was strangely calm, almost monotonous, despite the storm brewing inside me. "Yes," he said, and I heard a dry chuckle on the other end of the line. "Monica and I need the money to set up our life together. She deserves something better than a little place like that, anyway." Monica. The name hit me like a blow, a venomous sting straight to the heart. The truth, which I had suspected for months, now took shape and voice. Liam's late nights, always full of urgent work meetings, his sudden business trips that seemed to last an eternity, the growing distance between us that had turned our bed into a frozen desert, everything pointed to a third person. But hearing him utter her name so casually, as if I were the intruder in their lives, ignited a slow, but intense, fire in my chest. The sharp pain began to transform into a silent rage. "Sounds good," I replied, my voice still dangerously balanced. There was no way I would give him the satisfaction of hearing me break. "Not now. Not like this. My name is Eleanor. And until that phone call, I thought I had married a man I could trust. Liam and I had been together for 6 years. We were a couple who completed each other, or so I believed. He was the optimist, the dreamer, and I, the pragmatic one, anchoring his plans to reality. I always thought it was a good match. Things weren't always perfect, of course. What marriage is. But I believed in our partnership, in the bond we had built. We worked hard, saving every penny with one goal in mind, our farm. I remember the day we found it. It was a cozy place in the countryside, with a porch overlooking a small stream and an orchard I dreamed of cultivating. The moment I first saw it, with the afternoon sun filtering through the trees, I was hooked. It wasn't just a house, it was a symbol of everything we had built together, of all our dreams and sacrifices. Or, at least, that's what I thought. It was our sanctuary, our future. Looking back now, through the haze of shock and hurt, the signs were there, small but present, like subtle cracks in the foundation of a seemingly solid building. The conversations about finances that he always deflected with a charming smile and a quick kiss on my forehead. "Don't worry, Eleanor, I'm taking care of everything," he would say, and I, naive, trusted him. His tendency to dismiss my concerns with a, "You think too much, my love," or a, "Relax, it's all under control." I always assumed his confidence came from knowing what he was doing, from being the man of the house, the protector. Now, the painful reality set in. His confidence didn't come from competence, but from knowing he could manipulate me. That I was so blind with trust and love that I wouldn't question him. The rest of that day passed in a hazy blur. I sat through client meetings, hearing voices blend into a distant hum. I nodded at the right moments, forcing a smile when necessary, while my mind raced at dizzying speed. Liam thought he had won. He believed he could just pull the rug out from under me, sell the home I had worked so hard for, and get away with it, free and clear. The image of him with Monica, laughing at my misfortune, burned in my mind, a cold flame of contempt. But amidst that haze of betrayal, a small detail began to gleam, like a light at the end of a dark tunnel. A crucial detail that he, in his arrogance, did not know. The deed to the farm. That piece of paper, which for him was just a formality, the boring bureaucracy of a bank. For me, it was my security, my home. By luck, or perhaps by an instinct for self-preservation I didn't even know I possessed, the deed had been solely in my name for months. I remember that day clearly. It was when we refinanced the loan earlier in the year. The bank's proposal was clear, a lower interest rate if the property was in a single owner's name. Liam had readily agreed, without hesitation, his eyes already on the savings figures. "Great, less interest for us, Eleanor," he had said, with his wide, carefree smile. He never bothered to ask about the details, to read the tiny paperwork that I diligently went through. He simply trusted my ability to handle the bureaucracy, signing where I indicated, without a second of hesitation. For him, they were just papers. For me, it was a silent safeguard, a protection that now proved to be an unexpected shield. His inattention, his complete lack of interest in the details of our financial life, what I once saw as a trait of his carefree and confident character, now revealed itself to be his undoing. A bitter irony, but with a touch of satisfaction that began to seep into my chest. When I returned to my hotel room that night, the initial shock had given way to an iron resolve. The pain was still there, a tight knot in my stomach, but the anger, once a warm ember, was now a crackling flame that propelled me forward. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. Liam wanted to fight. Fine. Let the battle come. But this was a fight I was determined to win. My soul, once wounded, now strengthened, hardening like steel. I would not be the victim. I would be the architect of his downfall. The first call I made was to Alyssa. My lawyer and longtime friend, a woman of quick wit and an implacable sense of justice. I lay on the bed, phone to my ear, and began to describe the situation in meticulous detail. Every word from Liam, every comma from my conversation with him. My voice was calm, even controlled, though my pulse thumped hard at my temples. He sold the farm. Alyssa repeated, her voice full of incredulity. Does he even realize he can't do that without your consent? Apparently not, I said, a touch of dark amusement creeping into my tone. The image of Liam's sneering smile on the phone lingered in my mind. He thinks he's already spent the money on his new life with Monica. Alyssa let out a dry laugh, a sound that, strangely, brought me a small comfort. Well, he's going to be in for a shock, Eleanor. The sale is invalid. You can prove exclusive ownership, and if he took any money from the buyer, he's facing fraud charges. The word fraud sent a shock of satisfaction through me. It wasn't a vengeful satisfaction, but rather an acknowledgement that justice, in some way, would be served. The scales of equity, so unbalanced by Liam, would begin to tip back. What do we need to do? I asked, my mind already outlining the next steps. First, we'll notify the buyer that the sale is not legal, Alyssa said, her voice adopting the professional and direct tone I so appreciated. Then, we'll draft a formal letter to Liam, outlining the consequences of his actions. If he's stupid enough to try anything else, we'll take him to court. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange and powerful sense of calm settle over me. It was as if, for weeks, a dense fog had clouded my mind and emotions, and now, suddenly, a strong wind had dissipated it. Liam thought he had tricked me, that he had left me powerless and desperate, groping in the dark. But in reality, he had only set himself up for the final humiliation. And I would be there to watch. The betrayal, yes, it still hurt. It was a deep pain, like an open wound that still bled internally. But the prospect of taking back my life, of dismantling Liam's lies and seeing him stumble in his own arrogance, gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. It was a cold, calculating energy, unlike any emotion I had ever experienced. I spent the rest of the trip focusing on my work, immersing myself in spreadsheets and reports. I compartmentalized my emotions, locking away the pain and anger in a dark corner of my mind, while channeling all my energy into the task at hand. Every email sent, every client meeting, was a small act of resistance, a reminder that my life would not end with Liam's betrayal. I was still me, Eleanor, a competent professional and a strong woman. When I boarded the plane home, the sun was already setting, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. I was ready. Ready to face Liam, ready to dismantle his lies, and, most importantly, ready to start a new chapter without him. It wasn't just about winning a legal dispute, it was about reclaiming control of my own narrative, my dignity. The flight home gave me hours to reflect, with the monotonous hum of the airplane engine serving as a soundtrack to my thoughts. How had everything unfolded so abruptly? Liam's arrogance was truly impressive. He hadn't even tried to hide his betrayal, acting as if I were just another obstacle to be run over on his way to freedom and happiness with Monica. The image of him smiling at her, perhaps already planning their life on our farm, was a dagger in my heart. But instead of spiraling into blind rage, I focused on what I would do when I returned. I visualized every step, every conversation. Liam thought I was powerless, that he had left me with nothing. But he didn't know that I was, without even realizing it, playing a long game. The deed in my name was the key piece, the hidden card that changed the entire board. When the plane finally touched down, the sense of relief was almost palpable. The vibration of landing ran through my body, and I felt a shiver of anticipation. My first call, still at the baggage claim, was to Alyssa. "I'm back," I said, pulling my suitcase off the conveyor belt. The airport air, even saturated with sounds and smells, felt invigorating. "What's the next step?" "We've already notified the buyer," she replied, her voice brisk and efficient, as always. They were shocked, to say the least, and not very happy with Liam. "They're willing to cooperate, which helps our case immensely." "And Liam?" I asked, feeling a tremor of anticipation. "I sent the formal letter to his email this morning," she said. "It outlines the illegality of the sale, your exclusive ownership of the farm, and the potential consequences of fraud. He hasn't responded yet, but if I had to guess, he's going to be furious." Good, I thought. Let him stew. Let him feel a tenth of the confusion and helplessness he had inflicted on me. The drive back to the farm was filled with a mixture of emotions. Anxiety, yes, but also a growing sense of power. I was returning to my home, to my sanctuary, and not as a victim, but as the owner. When I arrived, the farm was strangely silent. The twilight bathed the porch, but there was no usual sense of warmth. Liam's things were still there, his coats carelessly draped over the living room chair, his shoes haphazardly tossed near the front door. The house looked the same, but there was a subtle difference, a heavy energy I hadn't noticed before, as if his presence, now veiled by betrayal, suffocated the air. I took a deep breath, an uneven gasp, and placed my suitcase on the floor. I knew the confrontation would come soon. The calm I felt was merely the calm before the storm. And sure enough, Liam stormed into the house that night, like a tornado. His face red with rage, the phone clutched in his hand like a weapon. He was a man unaccustomed to losing, and the shock of reality was beginning to set in. "What the hell is this?" he roared, shaking the crumpled letter Alyssa had sent him. His eyes, once so full of superficial charm, now burned with uncontrollable fury. "You're telling me I can't sell the farm? It's half mine." I remained standing, my arms crossed over my chest, feeling the warmth of the fireplace behind me. "No, Liam," I said calmly, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own." He froze. The fury on his face gave way to a mixture of confusion and, for an instant, a glimmer of fear. "What are you talking about?" I walked to the office Liam rarely used and retrieved the deed from the folder where I had kept it. I returned to the living room, holding it up for him to see. The paper seemed almost insignificant in my hands, but its power was immense. "After we refinanced, I transferred the deed to my name," I said, each word laden with a weight he was only now beginning to feel. "You signed it, remember? Or did you just skim through the paperwork like you always do?" For a moment, he said nothing. The silence in the room was so thick it could almost be cut with a knife. Then his expression contorted into a sneer, an ugly mask that tried to hide the growing panic. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Eleanor? This changes nothing. I've already made a deal and you're going to look like a fool when everything falls apart." I looked at him without blinking, the firmness in my gaze matching his anger. "The sale is already void, Liam. The buyer knows it and is ready to take legal action if you don't return the money. Oh, and speaking of money." I took a step closer, lowering my voice to a whisper that, paradoxically, seemed to cut through the air. "If you spent a single cent of that deposit, you're in even deeper trouble." Liam's confidence wavered. It was a flicker, a micro-expression of genuine terror that crossed his face before he replaced it with forced irritation. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, avoiding my gaze, his eyes darting to the floor. The voice, once so full of arrogance, now had a tone of doubt. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice maintaining an unwavering firmness that surprised me. It was as if the anger and pain were transforming into a cold, calculating force. "You've spent years treating me as if I were too naive to notice what you were doing, Liam. As if I were a fool, easy to deceive. But guess what? I was paying attention. And now you're going to deal with the consequences." He began to pace the room, frustration evident in his heavy footsteps and the way he ran his hand through his hair. He was the picture of a man losing control, and the sight gave me a bitter satisfaction. "This is ridiculous. You're overreacting. You can't just kick me out of here." I raised an eyebrow, my voice laced with an ironic tone. "Actually, I can. This farm is legally mine. You can stay here for now, but only because I'm giving you the courtesy of time to figure out your next step. But let me be clear, I'm not going anywhere. The house was my sanctuary, and I wouldn't give it up. Not anymore." In the following days, Liam's anger transformed into an increasingly palpable despair. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. He called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that alternated between pathetic pleas and empty threats. "Eleanor, please, let's talk. We can fix this," he'd say with a choked voice. The next, a darker tone would come, "You'll regret all of this, Eleanor. I won't let you get away with this unscathed." I listened to the messages with an almost clinical detachment, as if I were hearing the voice of a stranger. While Liam disintegrated, Alyssa worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She was a force of nature, her mind sharp and her professionalism impeccable. The farm buyer, furious at the wasted time and money, rescinded the sale agreement. They were fully cooperating with Alyssa, testifying to Liam's fraud. My lawyer then drafted the preliminary paperwork for the divorce proceedings, each line another step towards my freedom. "You're in an excellent position, Eleanor," Alyssa told me during one of our video meetings. Her voice was filled with infectious confidence. "Liam has no leverage here. Between the voided sale and the fraud charges hanging over his head, he'll have to cooperate if he wants to avoid a bigger mess. Her words were an immense relief, like a weight being lifted from my shoulders. But they also reminded me of a painful truth: how long had I allowed Liam to control my life? For years, I had ignored his disdain, his veiled arrogance, telling myself it wasn't worth the fight, that love meant giving in. But now I saw clearly how much I had given up of myself. The feeling of being trapped in a marriage that suffocated me, where my voice was silenced and my desires were scorned, was a burden I had carried for a long time. And now, I was determined to reclaim everything. Louise, my best friend, came over one night to help me reorganize the farm. She brought Thai food and a bottle of my favorite white wine, and her presence filled the house with a warmth I had forgotten. As we packed Liam's things, his golf shirts he never wore, the books he never read, the dusty trophies from a distant youth, we carefully stacked them in the corner of the living room. Each packed item was a small act of liberation. "How's he taking it?" Louise asked, holding up one of his tasteless ties with an amused grimace. "Not very well," I said, laughing despite myself. It was a genuine laugh, something I hadn't felt in a long time. "He's still convinced he can get away with it, but I won't budge. Not an inch." "Good," she said, tossing the tie into the box with playful disdain. "He doesn't deserve a single piece of your space or your time." I nodded, feeling an overwhelming wave of gratitude for her support. For so long, I had felt alone in my marriage, carrying the emotional and financial burden while Liam took credit for everything. He was the provider, the successful man, and I, the supportive wife. But now I had people on my side, strong, loyal women, and that made all the difference. They weren't just friends, they were my allies. The last piece of my plan fell into place the day Liam had the audacity to bring Monica to the farm. I was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing some work documents, immersed in numbers and projects, when I heard the familiar sound of Liam's car. My heart skipped a beat, but not from nervousness. It was a strong beat, of anticipation. They walked in as if they owned the place. Monica, with her impeccable blonde hair and an arrogant smile, looked around, assessing the environment. Her arm was elegantly entwined with Liam's, and they looked like the perfect couple from a luxury magazine. "So, this is where we're staying," Monica said, her voice dripping with a presumption that made me inwardly roll my eyes. Her tone was of someone who had already taken possession of my home, who already saw herself there, living the life I had built. I rose from my chair, my posture erect, my gaze fixed on them. My heart pounded, but my resolve was unshakable. It was time. Time to turn the tables. "No," I said firmly, my voice so calm it sounded like a gentle breeze before a storm. "This is where Liam was staying. You, Monica, are not staying here at all." Monica's smile wavered. Her eyes, once so full of a possessive glint, narrowed slightly, and she shot a quick glance at Liam, who looked equally stunned, his mask of arrogance beginning to crack. "What is this?" Liam demanded, his voice laden with a mixture of confusion and rising anger. He was losing control of the narrative, and that deeply irritated him. "This," I said, gesturing to the farm around me, to the walls, to the furniture I had chosen, to the small garden I had planted with my own hands, "is my home, Liam. Not yours, not hers, and certainly not a hotel for you to stay at after stabbing me in the back." With each word, I felt a weight being lifted from my shoulders. It was the voice I had silenced for so long, finally free to express the truth. Monica's expression hardened. She crossed her arms but remained silent, a defensive stance. Liam, on the other hand, looked about to explode, his face even redder. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice distorted by frustration. "You're being irrational." I stared at him, my eyes unblinking. The calmness in my voice was a stark contrast to his fury. "No, Liam, what's irrational is you thinking you could sell my house, walk away with the money, and expect me to simply accept it. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges. The mention of charges made his mouth snap shut. He faltered, as if an electric current had run through his body. He stood in the entryway to the living room, while Monica, visibly uncomfortable, retreated a little. You're being ridiculous, Eleanor, he said, his voice now tinged with despair, an attempt to make me feel guilty. You can't just kick me out of my own home. I took a step forward, closing the distance between us, my voice low but laden with authority. This is my home, Liam. The deed has been in my name for months, and you know it. You signed the paperwork without even reading it, as you always do. So, no, this is no longer your home. Monica looked at Liam, her perfectly manicured hand squeezing the strap of her purse. The seed of doubt had been planted. Wait, what is she talking about? She asked, her tone now sharp and suspicious. You said this was your farm, that you sold it. Liam flinched, trying to wave her off with a hasty gesture. It's complicated, Monica. I'll handle it. Oh, it's not complicated. I cut him off, taking another step, my gaze fixed on Monica. Let me explain. Liam tried to sell the farm behind my back, thinking he could pocket the money and leave me with nothing. What he didn't know is that I had transferred the deed to my name months ago. So, not only did he fail to sell it, but he also committed fraud by pretending he could. Monica's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Fraud? She whispered, taking a step back, moving away from Liam as if he were contaminated. Are you serious? Yes, fraud, I said, crossing my arms, my voice steady and unwavering. And I'm prepared to press charges if he doesn't pack his things and leave by the end of the day. The threat was real, and they knew it. Liam's facade finally crumbled. Despair washed over his face. You can't do this, Eleanor, he said, his voice now pleading, pathetic. We've been together for 6 years. You can't just kick me out. You kicked me out the moment you made that phone call, I said, my voice hardening with each word. You told me you were divorcing me and laughed about me having to find a new place to live. You didn't just betray me, Liam, you tried to ruin me. So don't stand there and pretend you're the victim. Monica took another step back, her eyes flickering between us, an expression of horror growing on her face. This is insane, she murmured, clutching her purse tighter. You didn't tell me any of this, Liam. You said you had everything sorted out. He turned to her, desperation etched on his face. Monica, I can fix this, I just need to. She cut him off with a raised hand. No. Just no. I'm not getting dragged into your mess. Without another word, she turned and walked out, the sound of the door closing behind her echoing through the farm, leaving Liam standing there, stunned and alone. I couldn't help but smile as the door closed. It was a small smile, almost imperceptible, but full of satisfaction. Looks like you're on your own, I said, turning to Liam, who was now completely disarmed. Now, let's talk about what happens next. He collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands, the image of defeat. Eleanor, please. I messed up, I know I did, but you don't have to do this. His voice was a whisper, lacking the swagger or arrogance from before. You're right, I said, picking up a folder from the kitchen counter and placing it on the coffee table in front of him. I don't have to do this, but I will. This is the divorce paperwork. My lawyer has already drafted it, and I suggest you sign it quickly. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on. He looked at the folder, his face pale. Do you really hate me that much? Hate you? I let out a bitter, humorless laugh. No, Liam. I don't hate you. I pity you. You had everything, someone who loved you, a home we built together, and you threw it all away because you couldn't see beyond your own ego. Your own vanity blinded you. I stood up, my heart pounding, but my resolve unshakable. I want you out of here by the end of the day. Take your things and figure out where you're going to stay. This is the last time I'll help you." He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Okay," he mumbled. "I'll go." "Good," I said, walking towards the door. "And don't even think about trying anything else. Alyssa is already taking care of everything, and the next time you cross the line, I won't hesitate to let the courts handle it." As I opened the door, Liam slowly got up, grabbing his coat. He didn't look at me as he left, his footsteps heavy with defeat. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, not for him, but for the life we could have had if he was the man I thought he was. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by a sense of relief. I closed the door behind him, locking it with the new key I had made. This was my home now, and no one, especially Liam, would take it from me again. The silence in the farm after Liam left was deafening. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The space no longer felt heavy with his presence, his presumption, or his lies. It was just me, the home I had built, and the quiet realization that I had won, not just against him, but against every doubt I had ever had about standing up for myself. I stood in the middle of the living room, taking in the emptiness where his things had been. His enormous gaming chair, the framed team jerseys that had cluttered the walls, and the garish coffee table he insisted on keeping, all were gone. The farm felt cleaner, brighter, like it was truly mine again. Louise came over that night with takeout and a bottle of wine. "He's really gone?" she asked, sinking onto the sofa with a dramatic sigh. "Gone and not coming back," I said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. I gave him until the end of the day to clear out. He didn't argue. Louise raised her glass. To new beginnings and well-deserved victories. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling the weight of the past week slowly lift. To never letting anyone walk all over me again. In the following days, I began to reclaim the farm piece by piece. I rearranged the furniture, hung my favorite artwork in the living room, and filled the space with things that made me happy. It wasn't just about redecorating, it was about transforming the farm into a reflection of who I was, not the person Liam had tried to make me be. Alyssa called with updates on the legal proceedings, her voice full of the kind of confidence that made me feel invincible. "The fraud charges are off the table, as the buyer decided not to pursue them," she explained. "But the divorce paperwork is moving along smoothly. Once Liam signs, you'll be officially free." Hearing the word "free" made my chest tighten. It wasn't just about the divorce, it was about everything I had been carrying for years, the resentment, the doubt, the feeling of being trapped in a marriage that didn't value me. It was all finally being lifted. Liam tried to contact me a few times, his messages ranging from timid apologies to pathetic attempts to guilt-trip me into reconciliation. "I made a mistake," one read. "Can't we at least talk about it?" Another was more desperate. "You're going to ruin me, Eleanor. Is that what you want?" I didn't respond. For the first time, I wasn't going to spend my energy trying to fix something that was irreparably broken. He had made his choices, and now he was dealing with the consequences. By the end of the week, the farm felt like a completely new space, cozy, inviting, and entirely my own. As I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, the lights outside twinkling through the trees, I thought about everything that had happened. Liam's betrayal was a shock, but it was also an awakening. For too long, I had allowed myself to believe that I didn't deserve better, that I had to settle for the crumbs of respect and love he chose to give me. But now I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my farm, I was reclaiming my life. A month later, my life felt completely different. The farm was unrecognizable, not because of any drastic renovations, but because of how it felt. It was a space that reflected me, my tastes, my personality, and my newfound independence. The absence of Liam's clutter and his domineering presence made the home feel lighter, freer. The divorce was proceeding smoothly. Alyssa had handled everything with precision, ensuring Liam had no room to argue or complicate the process. He signed the papers without much argument, likely realizing he had no leverage. There was no big confrontation, no emotional plea to work things out, just a cold, clean separation that felt both bittersweet and profoundly satisfying. One day, while I was tidying up some old papers, I found a photo of Liam and me from our early years together. We were smiling, arm in arm, full of hope and promise. I looked at it for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. There were good times, moments when I truly believed we were building a life together. But those moments were gone, overshadowed by years of neglect, manipulation, and betrayal. I placed the photo in an envelope and put it in a drawer. It wasn't worth keeping out, but I wasn't ready to throw it away either. It was a part of my past, but it no longer defined me. Louise and I celebrated the finalized divorce with dinner and drinks at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. "You're glowing," she said, raising her cocktail in a toast. "Single life suits you." I laughed, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "It's not single life," I said. "It's freedom. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm living by someone else's rules." We toasted to that, and as the night wore on, I felt a rising sense of pride in myself. I had faced one of the hardest moments of my life and come out stronger. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Back at the farm, I started planning for the future. The farm had become more than a refuge, it was a symbol of everything I had reclaimed. But I knew I wouldn't stay there forever. One day, I would move to a new place, one without any lingering shadow of my life with Liam. Until then, I was determined to enjoy every moment in the space I had fought so hard to keep. As I curled up on the couch that night, a sense of peace washed over me. I thought about how Liam had laughed during that phone call, so certain he had won, and I couldn't help but smile. His arrogance had been his undoing, and my quiet strength had been my salvation. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I made the decisions, one where I chose happiness on my own terms. And after a long time, I truly felt free. Thank you for sharing Eleanor's story. She was indeed caught off guard by a terrible betrayal, but with the support of her friends and her inner strength, she managed to turn the situation around and overcome it. If you've ever gone through something similar, remember, you are stronger than you think. If you enjoyed this story, please like and share this video to inspire more people, and subscribe to the channel for more compelling stories.